Elon Musk's mom didn't say it on a big stage with flashing lights or viral applause. She didn't frame it as a manifesto or a rule for success. She said it the way people often say the most important things, almost casually, without demanding attention, as if trusting that the right people would hear it when they were ready. And because it was quiet, because it didn't sound dramatic or revolutionary, many people overlooked it. But if you sit with it long enough, it begins to feel like one of those truths that can quietly reshape how you see ambition, struggle, and self-worth. May Musk has lived several lives in one. She's been a dietitian, a model, a single mother raising 3 children across continents, and eventually a public figure known largely because of her son's extraordinary visibility. But what often gets missed is that she didn't arrive at wisdom by watching success from the sidelines. She earned it through instability, reinvention, financial stress, and years of being underestimated. So when she speaks, even softly, it's worth listening closely, not because she's the mother of a billionaire, but because she represents a kind of resilience that doesn't shout. What she has hinted at again and again, sometimes in interviews, sometimes in passing remarks, is a simple but uncomfortable idea. You don't need permission to begin, and you don't need approval to continue. She has spoken about doing what she had to do. Taking opportunities that weren't glamorous, starting over in new cities, and refusing to wait until circumstances were perfect. She didn't dress this up as courage. She didn't label it grit. She treated it as normal. Necessary. Almost obvious. And that's precisely why it's so easy to miss. We live in a culture that loves loud lessons. We like our advice packaged as commandments, life hacks, or viral quotes printed over dramatic backgrounds. We want the kind of wisdom that announces itself as wisdom. But real insight often arrives without that packaging. It arrives embedded in lived experience, in sentences that sound almost too plain to be profound. May Musk's quiet message falls into that category. It doesn't flatter the ego. It doesn't promise instant transformation. Instead, it asks something far more demanding: personal responsibility without drama. Consider how often people delay their lives while waiting for validation. They wait to feel ready. They wait to be chosen. They wait for someone older, richer, or more confident to tell them they're allowed to try. May Musk's life story quietly dismantles that habit. She didn't wait for stability before acting. She didn't wait for applause before moving forward. She didn't wait for life to make sense before participating in it. She acted first, adjusted later, and trusted herself enough to keep going even when the outcome was uncertain. This mindset is deeply unfashionable. It doesn't align well with the modern obsession with optimization, with having the perfect plan before taking the first step. It doesn't cater to the fear of making mistakes in public. And yet, it's the mindset that actually moves people forward. When you strip away the mythology around success, you often find ordinary actions repeated consistently under imperfect conditions. That's the part most people don't want to hear, which may be why it's said quietly. There's also something striking about how she frames struggle. She doesn't romanticize it, but she doesn't resent it either. In her telling, hardship is not a personal failure or a dramatic tragedy. It's a phase, a circumstance, something to work through. That perspective alone can be liberating. When you stop interpreting difficulty as proof that you're doing something wrong, you free up an enormous amount of energy. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What's the next practical step?" That question, simple, grounded, unsentimental, has likely shaped her children more than any grand speech ever could. Elon Musk is often described as fearless or reckless, depending on who's talking. But beneath that public persona is a pattern of behavior that reflects early exposure to self-reliance and adaptability. When you grow up watching someone quietly solve problems instead of dramatizing them, you internalize a different relationship with risk. You don't assume that fear means stop. You assume it means pay attention and proceed carefully. Another part of her message that tends to go unnoticed is her attitude toward age and timing. She has spoken openly about becoming more visible and successful later in life, about not being limited by the idea that certain doors close after a certain age. Again, she doesn't frame this as defiance. She simply refuses to accept unnecessary limitations. In a world obsessed with early success and youthful achievement, that refusal is quietly radical. It suggests that the timeline you've been measuring yourself against might be imaginary. That the pressure to have it all figured out by a certain age is more cultural noise than truth. When you really absorb that idea, it can be both unsettling and freeing. Unsettling because it removes excuses. Freeing because it removes shame. If it's not too late, then the only real question left is whether you're willing to try. What makes her message especially powerful is that it doesn't require you to be extraordinary. It doesn't assume genius, privilege, or luck. It assumes effort, adaptability, and a willingness to endure discomfort without turning it into an identity. That's a far more accessible formula than most success narratives, but it's also far less glamorous. There's no guarantee of recognition. No promise of applause. Just the quiet satisfaction of progress, there's also an undercurrent of self-respect in the way she talks about her life. She doesn't diminish her own work to elevate her children's achievements. She doesn't present herself as merely a supporting character. She acknowledges her role, her choices, and her agency. That, too, is a lesson often missed. You can support others without erasing yourself. You can be proud of your children without defining yourself solely through them. You can live a full, evolving life regardless of who's watching. In many ways, her quiet message challenges the idea that success is something bestowed from the outside. Instead, it frames success as something built from the inside out. Through decisions that are often invisible to others. Decisions to keep learning. To keep working. To keep moving even when the path isn't clear. Those decisions rarely make headlines, but they shape outcomes more reliably than any single breakthrough moment. It's also worth noticing what she doesn't emphasize. She doesn't dwell on motivation as a feeling. She doesn't talk about waiting for inspiration. Her life suggests that action often comes first, and motivation follows. This flips a common assumption on its head. Many people believe they need to feel confident before acting, when in reality confidence is usually the result of having acted and survived the outcome. By acting without waiting for confidence, you build it gradually, almost accidentally. This idea can feel uncomfortable because it removes the safety net of emotional readiness. It asks you to tolerate uncertainty and imperfection. But it also gives you something far more valuable: momentum. And momentum, once established, can carry you through periods of doubt far more effectively than positive thinking ever could. There's a subtle humility in the way Musk talks about learning as well. She doesn't present herself as someone who always knew the answers. She learned through experience, through mistakes, through starting over. This humility makes her message more credible, not less. It suggests that wisdom is not a fixed trait but a byproduct of engagement with life. You don't become wise by avoiding errors, you become wise by making them and continuing anyway. That perspective can soften the fear of failure that paralyzes so many people. If failure is not a verdict on your worth but a data point, then it loses much of its power. It becomes something to analyze rather than something to hide from. And when you're no longer hiding, you're free to experiment, to adjust, to grow. Another overlooked aspect of her message is how she relates to independence. She values it, but not in a way that rejects help or community. Instead, independence seems to mean responsibility for your own life, combined with openness to collaboration. It's not about doing everything alone. It's about not outsourcing your sense of agency. That distinction matters. You can ask for help without giving up ownership of your direction. This balance is especially relevant in a time when many people feel overwhelmed by choices and expectations. It's easy to feel small in the face of global problems, massive systems, and towering success stories. Musk's quiet wisdom pulls the focus back to what you can control: your effort, your adaptability, your willingness to keep showing up. It doesn't deny the existence of obstacles, but it refuses to let them become excuses for inaction. There's also something deeply grounding about the way she seems to accept change. Moving countries, changing careers, reinventing herself, these weren't framed as crises but as responses to reality. That attitude can transform how you experience life's disruptions. When change is inevitable, resistance only adds suffering. Acceptance, on the other hand, allows you to redirect energy toward building something new. This doesn't mean suppressing emotion or pretending things are easy. It means not allowing emotion to become an anchor that holds you in place. You can feel fear and still move. You can feel sadness and still plan. You can feel uncertainty and still take the next step. That's a mature, nuanced understanding of resilience, and it's rarely captured in sound bites. What makes all of this especially compelling is how ordinary it sounds when stated plainly. Work. Adapt. Learn. Continue. There's no mysticism here, no secret formula. And perhaps that's why it's so often ignored. We're drawn to complexity because it gives us something to blame when we don't act. Simplicity leaves us exposed. If the path forward is simple but not easy, then the responsibility rests with us. Musk's quiet message doesn't try to impress you. It doesn't try to inspire you in the conventional sense. It simply tells the truth as she's lived it. You can wait, or you can begin. You can dramatize your struggles, or you can work through them. You can measure your life against others, or you can focus on what you're building. None of these choices guarantee success, but they do guarantee movement, and movement matters. It changes how you see yourself. Each small action taken despite doubt becomes evidence that you are capable. Over time, that evidence accumulates. It reshapes your identity from someone who hopes to someone who does. That transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't announce itself. It happens quietly, in the background, just like the message itself. In a world obsessed with noise, attention, and instant results, there's something almost subversive about this kind of wisdom. It asks you to trust process over performance, effort over image, consistency over intensity. It suggests that you don't need to be extraordinary to build an extraordinary life. You need to be willing, persistent, and honest with yourself. Perhaps the most powerful part of what she's conveyed is the idea that life doesn't owe you clarity before you act. Clarity often comes after action, not before. If you wait to feel certain, you may wait forever. But if you act with the information you have, you create new information. You learn. You adjust. You grow. That idea alone can change how you approach decisions. Instead of searching endlessly for the right choice, you make a reasonable one and commit to making it work. You stop treating decisions as irreversible verdicts and start treating them as experiments. This mindset reduces anxiety and increases engagement. It keeps you in motion. There's also an implicit respect for time in her outlook. Not urgency in a frantic sense, but an understanding that life moves forward whether you do or not. This awareness doesn't create panic. It creates focus. It encourages you to invest your energy where it matters rather than where it looks impressive. It reminds you that years pass quickly, and the best way to honor that fact is to live deliberately. What's striking is how compatible this quiet philosophy is with a wide range of lives. You don't need to be an entrepreneur, an artist, or a public figure for it to apply. Whether you're building a career, raising a family, learning a skill, or simply trying to become more grounded, the principles hold. Start. Continue. Adapt. Respect yourself enough to keep going. In the end, what Musk said quietly isn't a secret at all. It's a reminder of something many people already know but hesitate to act on. That you are more capable than you think. That waiting rarely improves things. That progress is usually unglamorous. And that a meaningful life is built through ordinary days handled with courage and consistency. The reason not to overlook this message isn't because it's tied to a famous name. It's because it offers a way of moving through the world that is both realistic and empowering. It doesn't promise ease, but it promises agency. It doesn't guarantee success, but it guarantees growth. And in a time when so many people feel stuck, overwhelmed, or behind, that quiet assurance may be exactly what's needed. You don't need to announce your intentions. You don't need to wait for applause. You don't need to have it all figured out. You can begin where you are, with what you have, and adjust as you learn. That's the message. It won't shout at you. But if you listen closely, it has the power to change how you live. What makes this quiet message linger is how it continues to unfold the longer you sit with it. At first, it sounds almost too simple to matter. But over time, it begins to challenge deeply ingrained habits of thought, habits that keep people small without them even realizing it. One of those habits is the belief that struggle should look a certain way, that if life is hard, it must also be dramatic, visible, or validated by others. Musk's life gently contradicts that idea. Much of her struggle happened without witnesses, without sympathy, without anyone declaring it meaningful. And yet, it was meaningful because she chose to keep moving forward anyway. There's a certain emotional maturity required to live that way. It means resisting the urge to turn pain into performance. It means not needing your difficulties to be acknowledged before you allow yourself to overcome them. This is difficult in an age where attention has become a kind of currency, where suffering is often shared publicly in search of connection or validation. Her approach doesn't condemn that impulse, but it offers an alternative. You can process, heal, and grow privately, without turning your life into a spectacle. That idea alone can be unsettling. Many people subconsciously rely on external recognition to feel real. They want their effort to be seen, their resilience to be applauded. When that doesn't happen, motivation fades. But what if your effort mattered even when no one noticed? What if the quiet rebuilding of your life was enough? Musk's example suggests that it is, not in a sentimental way, but in a practical one. The results speak eventually, even if the process remains invisible. Another layer of her quiet message is how she relates to self-doubt. She doesn't pretend it doesn't exist. But she also doesn't treat it as a stop sign. Self-doubt, in her world, seems more like background noise, something to acknowledge without obeying. This is a powerful reframing. Most people assume confidence must come first, that certainty is a prerequisite for action. In reality, certainty is often a luxury that only appears after you've taken risks and survived them. By acting without certainty, you build a different kind of confidence, the kind rooted in experience rather than fantasy. You stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What will I do if I fail?" That subtle shift changes everything. It moves you from fear to strategy, from paralysis to preparation. It doesn't eliminate risk, but it makes risk manageable. There's also something quietly radical in her relationship with identity. She has never allowed herself to be reduced to a single label. Model, dietitian, mother, immigrant, public figure. None of these became a cage. They were chapters, not conclusions. This fluid sense of identity is especially important in a world that pressures people to define themselves early and rigidly. When identity becomes fixed, growth feels like betrayal. When identity is flexible, growth feels natural. This flexibility allows you to let go of outdated versions of yourself without guilt. It allows you to change your mind, your direction, your priorities. Many people stay stuck not because they lack opportunity, but because they feel trapped by who they've been. May Musk's life quietly suggests that you are allowed to evolve, even if it confuses people who thought they understood you. Her attitude toward money is another understated lesson. She doesn't glamorize wealth, nor does she pretend it's irrelevant. Money is treated as a tool, not a moral measure. She has spoken about times of financial difficulty without shame, and times of stability without arrogance. This balanced view strips money of its emotional extremes. It's neither proof of worth nor evidence of failure. It's simply one variable among many. That perspective can be freeing in a culture obsessed with financial milestones. When money stops being a referendum on your value, you're able to make clearer decisions. You can take calculated risks. You can accept temporary setbacks. You can focus on long-term sustainability instead of short-term appearances. And perhaps most importantly, you can separate your self-respect from your bank balance. There's also a lesson embedded in how she models perseverance without bitterness. Many people endure hardship, but they carry resentment forward like a badge. Their pain becomes part of their identity. May Musk doesn't seem to do that. She acknowledges what was difficult, but she doesn't weaponize it. She doesn't use it to justify cynicism or entitlement. She moves on. This doesn't mean forgetting or minimizing the past. It means refusing to let it dictate the future. That refusal requires strength. It's easier to cling to old wounds than to risk new disappointments. But clinging keeps you anchored to a version of life that no longer exists. Letting go creates space for something new. Another subtle aspect of her message is how she relates to success itself. Success is not treated as a finish line, but as a byproduct. There's no sense of arrival, no suggestion that one achievement settles everything. This prevents the emptiness that often follows big milestones. When success is a process rather than a destination, there's always something meaningful to engage with next. This mindset also protects against comparison. If you're not racing toward a fixed endpoint, other people's timelines lose their power over you. Someone else's breakthrough doesn't diminish your progress. Someone else's recognition doesn't invalidate your effort. You're focused on your own trajectory, your own learning curve. It's worth noticing how much of this philosophy centers on internal measures rather than external ones. Progress is defined by consistency, not applause. Growth is measured by adaptability, not status. Fulfillment comes from engagement, not validation. These values are easy to endorse intellectually, but difficult to live by. They require daily choices that often go unnoticed. There's also an implicit trust in reality itself. Instead of fighting what is, she responds to it. If circumstances change, she changes with them. This responsiveness is different from passivity. It's active engagement with the present moment. It means making the best decision available rather than the ideal decision imagined. Many people exhaust themselves trying to control outcomes instead of focusing on inputs. They want guarantees. They want certainty. They want reassurance that their effort will pay off. Reality doesn't offer those guarantees. It offers feedback. When you're willing to work with feedback rather than against uncertainty, you become far more resilient. Her quiet message also reframes the idea of sacrifice. Sacrifice is often portrayed as a noble suffering that should be acknowledged. In her story, sacrifice is simply part of the equation. You give something up to gain something else. There's no martyrdom, no expectation of reward. This pragmatic view prevents burnout fueled by unmet expectations. When you don't expect life to compensate you for your sacrifices, you choose them more carefully. You stop sacrificing indiscriminately. You align your effort with your values rather than with approval. That alignment creates a deeper sense of integrity, even when things are hard. Another important thread is how she models self-trust. Not arrogance, not stubbornness, but a steady belief that she can figure things out as they arise. This kind of trust doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from having survived uncertainty before. Each time you navigate a challenge, you deposit evidence into your own sense of capability. This is why action is so critical. You can't think your way into self-trust. You have to experience it. You have to act, adjust, and realize that you didn't break when things went wrong. Over time, this creates a quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. There's also a lesson in how she handles visibility. Becoming more publicly recognized later in life didn't seem to alter her core values. Visibility didn't become the goal, it became a context. This distinction matters. When visibility becomes the goal, authenticity erodes. When it's simply a byproduct, authenticity can remain intact. In a digital world that rewards constant self-promotion, this restraint is rare. It suggests that you can participate in public life without letting it redefine you. You can be seen without becoming consumed by being seen. That balance protects your sense of self, Perhaps one of the most overlooked aspects of her quiet message is its compassion. Not a soft, indulgent compassion, but a realistic one. She doesn't demand perfection from herself or others. She allows room for learning, for mistakes, for slow progress. This compassion creates sustainability. It allows effort to continue without being crushed by self-criticism. When you remove the expectation of perfection, you're more likely to begin. When you remove the fear of judgment, you're more likely to persist. Compassion, in this sense, is not weakness. It's a strategic advantage. There's also an implicit understanding that life is long. Not in a complacent way, but in a patient one. When you stop treating every setback as a final verdict, you give yourself room to recover. You stop catastrophizing temporary difficulties. You develop a longer view. This long view changes how you respond to disappointment. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen?" you ask, "What can I learn that will help me next time?" This doesn't eliminate pain, but it transforms it into something useful. Pain becomes information rather than a sentence. What's striking is how all of this forms a coherent way of living without ever being presented as a philosophy. It's not packaged. It's not branded. It's lived. And that's why it resonates differently. It doesn't demand belief, it invites observation. You look at the life, the consistency, the adaptability, and you draw your own conclusions. The quietness of the message is part of its strength. Loud ideas often fade quickly. Quiet ones tend to echo. They return to you at unexpected moments, when you're hesitating, when you're comparing, when you're waiting for permission that may never come, and perhaps that's the real reason not to overlook what she said quietly. Because it doesn't try to convince you. It trusts you to recognize its truth when you're ready. It assumes you're capable of understanding something simple and difficult at the same time. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need a dramatic turning point. You don't need external validation to justify your effort. You can work with what you have, where you are, and let the results accumulate over time. This way of living won't make you famous overnight. It won't guarantee extraordinary outcomes. But it will give you something far more reliable: momentum, resilience, and a sense of authorship over your own life. And once you have those, the need for loud reassurance begins to fade. What remains is a quiet confidence, built slowly, reinforced daily, and grounded in reality. It doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It simply continues. Sometimes the most powerful guidance isn't meant to be heard by everyone at once, but by the one person ready to stop waiting and quietly begin.